Moi everyone and welcome to Finnish Plate. Kalakukko or fish pouch is a very classic and traditional dish from Savonia region in eastern Finland. This one's filled with small fish and pork belly, but there's a couple other variations to it too. This one's not very difficult to make, but somehow it has kind of fallen out of favor over the past few decades, and it's not really that common anymore in Finland, except maybe in summertime marketplaces and a couple very famous bakers in eastern Finland who make this. But join me and I'll show you how to make this kalakukko at home. First, let's make the rye crust. I have here 500 milliliters of cold water, 100 grams of melted butter, a deciliter of flour, all-purpose flour, and then 800 grams of rye flour plus a tablespoon of salt. Let's start by putting the water in here, and let's mix in the salt and the all-purpose flour. We'll just mix this all up. And we'll start adding the rye flour in. At this point, now that it's still a slurry, we are going to add the butter in here. And mix all that in. And we're going to add the rest of the rye flour in while mixing it with a wooden spoon instead. This flour doesn't really need to be kneaded that much because it's mostly rye, so there's not much going on in terms of gluten. We're just looking to incorporate all the flour. Just make sure that you scrape through the bottom so all the flour gets incorporated. This is going to be pretty dry dough, unlike your regular rye bread dough. At this stage, it might be easier just to mix it by hand. Now that all the flour has been incorporated, we're just going to let this rest for just 5 minutes just to let it hydrate well before we go ahead and roll this. The kalakukko can be filled with a lot of things, fish or even vegetables, but there are two main fillings. One is vendes, the other one is perch. Now, both of them might be a little bit difficult to get in the US, so what I would recommend, rather than going out of your way trying to find either vendes or perch and then getting fish that probably isn't so fresh, go to your store and see what's fresh and use that instead. I went to the Asian market and I actually found some smelt, which is very good substitute for vendes, and I also have here some basa filet, which you could use as a substitute for perch. Neither one is very fancy kind of a fish, neither one is very distinctive taste, so you can easily substitute with something that you have locally. And also in the Asian supermarket, I have here some thinly sliced pork belly, which is going to be a key component in our kalakukko. So let's take our dough and we're going to start rolling this out. We're going to roll this out to about 1 centimeter thickness on the middle. The edges are going to be half the thickness of the center. The dough does not have to be very perfectly round because we are going to pick up the edges to cover the filling. But what you do want to avoid is these large cracks. My fish has already been prepped pretty much. The head's been removed and also the tail. I have here about 3 pounds of smelt. So we're going to start by just adding a little bit of pearl barley on the bottom. And we are going to dry our fish. Make sure it's pretty much as dry as it gets. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to layer the fish with some pork belly and salt, pepper. Don't even try to go all the way to the edge with the filling. Just add salt. And we will add some slices of pork belly. Add some pepper. And some more salt. And basically, we're just going to keep repeating this until all our fish is done. Now what we need to do is lift up the rye crust to cover the entire filling. And in places like these, you could just cut off the rye crust and use it as a filling for places where more crust is needed. At this stage, I'm just going to put it on a piece of parchment paper because it is getting very heavy. And so like here, for example, what we can do is we will just roll out a piece of rye crust and simply place it on top. Now with wet hands, we are just going to work this dough, kind of like if you were doing some clay work. And then just even out the cracks, fill in the cracks, and make sure that there are no cracks where the filling can ooze out in the oven. So this will take a little bit of time and practice. You can definitely see that I could use a little practice on this, but it's all right. Just go over it over and over again and then just fill in those cracks. You just want to make a good seal so that the entire filling is sealed inside completely. Now Kalakukko has been in the oven 250 degrees Celsius, about 480 Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. I'm going to brush this with some butter, then I'm going to wrap it in foil, and then it's going to go into 125 degrees Celsius, about 250 Fahrenheit for at least 5 hours. And after that, it's going to rest for 2 to 3 hours before even cutting it. And now I'm just going to wrap this up. There you go. So I had the kalakukko in the oven for 5 hours, and now it's been resting for several hours to cool down. There are two distinct methods of eating the kalakukko. The other one is you slice it, make slices out of it, and then enjoy those as a big piece. Or the other one is that you cut the lid off and then you scoop some of the filling plus some of the bread and eat that as it is. But let's actually cut it open so we can see what it looks like inside. And here we go. Here we can see those layers of the fish and also the pork. So now what you can do is you can slice this, cut up a slice. It should be eaten warm, and then put a little bit of butter on it and then enjoy it as is. And now let's just put a little bit of butter on it. And here we go, Finnish kalakukko. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Finish Your Plate.